Paul Bishop, welcome to Suit Up the Podcast.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me.
Okay, I have to give you huge kudos at having what looks like a fantastic paperback collection behind you. There's some times where I get on this, we turn on the Zoom calls and there's just this bland wall behind them. I'm not calling out any guests, but sometimes it happens. And I always feel just a little bit guilty for my awesome book collection. So thank you for joining me in
My
that
my
way.
pleasure. Yeah.
We
I mean,
are
we're proud of our book collections, aren't we?
We are, and this is the advent of the Kindle. I think I've had this conversation a couple of times with people. I think that as much as KDP is a really great, you can print on demand books, and it's
Yeah.
awesome, and it is a new age of pulp in some ways. I really do feel like the Kindle and the ebook is that really the new version of the pulps from the old days.
I mean, I think so because it's made it so accessible not only to bring stuff back, but for people to publish new pulp stuff
Mm-hmm.
without gatekeepers. Now,
Mm-hmm.
some of it's really bad, but some of it's pretty darn good. And you just have to be selective enough to do that. I mean, one of the things with the books behind me and in the rest of the library here, um, there's probably not too much that's on the shelves that's beyond the 70s or 80s. Right? I mean, the reason that I love these books is for the cover art.
Mm-hmm.
And cover art in the last decade or more, 2 decades, has just become atrocious. And the salespeople will tell you, well, no, that's what sells books, right? The silhouette of a
Mm-hmm.
guy running away with the author's name big and the title big,
Mm-hmm.
but they all look generic and the same. And what I think we're seeing now also is the advent of a lot of AI art.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like the cover of the new Sherlock Holmes book that we're going to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
I had somebody accuse me of doing that AI art, and it's not. I sat with the artist while she did a digital painting, and
Mm-hmm.
she did exactly what I asked for. I didn't want to have the traditional deerstalker cap and
Yes.
meerschaum pipe because that's old-fashioned to me. And the
Mm-hmm.
fact is, those in reality don't represent Sherlock Holmes uh, in the fact that it was one Sidney Paget illustration in the original stories that had him in a deerstalker. And then William Gillette used the
Mm-hmm.
calabash meerschaum pipe so that he could emote on stage when he was doing Sherlock Holmes. So
Mm-hmm.
they're from various areas, but there's no denying that they've become an iconic brand. But what
Mm-hmm.
I wanted with this cover is a Sherlock Holmes who was vibrant and alive and dangerous. And that's what I was looking for, something that would draw the eye in that wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
look old-fashioned.
He definitely has. You do a good job of with that cover art. I, for whatever reason, my brain immediately went. He looks like Sam Witwer just a little bit. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the actor, but like he has those kinds of like high cheekbones, devilish appearance, which I think really fits within the vibe because you are getting in, especially a lot of the more modern interpretations of Sherlock Holmes, a
Yes.
much more Robert Downey Jr., Henry Cavill, actors who it's it's almost a fun acting exercise, I'm guessing, for them because they recognize this character has so much history that they're trying to both bring their own piece to it, but also, you have to have how
They've
far
got to
can you
fit
push
within that.
Holmes?
Yeah. The, it's an iconic role and you
Hmm.
can make it your own, but you still have to honor what's gone before.
Hmm.
Um, and again, with this book, 52 Weeks, 52 Sherlock Holmes novels, um, the idea was to not do what everybody else has done. This isn't just
It's
book
brilliant.
reviews, right? What I told the essayist who contributed is I want to know why this particular book they're writing about was special to them.
Hmm.
And if not the book, then why Sherlock Holmes was special to them in their lives. And I think it's that personal touch that really sets us apart
Hmm.
from other similar compendiums that are out there. And it was amazing some of the stories that I received by asking for that. Sometimes I had to send them back, no, let's get more personal with this.
You
But
are writing for the New Yorker. Tell me what it means to you.
yes, exactly. And it was a template
Hmm.
that we had used when we were doing the Six Gun Justice podcast. We did three
Hmm.
similar books, 52 Weeks, 52 Western novels, 52 Western TV shows, and 52 Western movies.
Hmm.
And that had worked real well. And it was the same format and the same. I don't care if this is the most obscure television show, Western, one episode and done. If it was important to you, then we'll write about it.
Hmm.
Now, um, when I began to get the essays in, I had a publisher lined up, and I sent him one of the essays. And it was about a book called Sherlock Holmes in New York, which is a
Hmm.
paperback original. It
Hmm.
is a very mediocre novelization of a very mediocre um, TV movie.
Yes.
And um, the publisher went, I can't publish it. This is such a horrible book. And I went, read the essay.
Hmm.
The essay is so personal to the young
Hmm.
man at 10 years old when he found this book. And
Hmm.
Peter Ackerman, the guy that wrote this, I've known Peter for years, and I had no idea, that this was so important to him. And he was able to express that. And that's what I really wanted to capture. So I went to another publisher,
Hmm.
somebody who got the idea of what I was trying to do.
Well, and that's what makes the format of it so enjoyable and so rich. I am a big Sherlock Holmes fan. Just behind my head, I have 3 sets of the complete Sherlock Holmes.
There you go.
And the moment you mentioned this project, I was like, oh, this is fascinating. I love it. And reading through it, you just get some of these are books that I've heard of. Some of these are ones I hadn't heard of. I read a book on it's called From Holmes to Sherlock. It was about
Yes,
all the creators who have been involved in this. And this is such an interesting companion piece to that book
that's an excellent
because
book.
yes,
If
it's
you really want
amazing.
to get the whole world of Sherlock Holmes. Very well written, just an amazing book.
It's the complete production history essentially of everything.
Yeah,
And so being able to, okay, that's the history of all of these books, all these stories, all these pastiches. And then this book, it's the personal stories of the actual readers. It's the creators.
yeah.
And then you get that second hand clapping of
It all
these are the
comes
people
together.
that enjoyed it
Yeah.
and what it means to them. So I really hats off to you in the format. I read through it and I was like, oh, I remember when A Study in Charlotte came out, and a friend was like, oh, you have to read this. I'm like, it's a YA kids book. Why would I read this? But it's so good. Like it's actually
It's
a
so
genuinely
good.
good Holmes story.
And yet there are purists who lose their mind over it,
Hmm.
right? Because this isn't Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes doesn't have a great granddaughter. Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
For me, I think it's the format is so flexible. There's room for
Hmm.
all of this. And if you don't like it, don't read it,
Hmm.
don't watch it.
Yeah.
There are people out there who will like it. And all of it keeps Sherlock Holmes in the
Hmm.
forefront of the public consciousness. If
Hmm.
it wasn't for all of these pastiches, if it wasn't for all of the strange Sherlockian relatives that drop out of the family tree all over the place, he wouldn't be the force of nature that he is.
Hmm.
And I think it is that love for him that generates, these pastiches, and people really want to be aligned with Sherlock Holmes. I mean, just look at the moment. We've got Watson on television. We've got Sherlock and Daughter on television. We're
Hmm.
about to have young Sherlock Holmes from Guy Ritchie on television.
Ooh,
That's three
chef's kiss.
Sherlock
I'm
Holmes
excited
shows
about that.
currently in 2020, five. I mean, that's just amazing.
Okay, I do have to ask, that does prompt me. Do you have a favorite on-screen portrayal of Sherlock Holmes?
Yeah, and I do. And it has to be Johnny Lee Miller. Um,
Okay.
and I think part of that is he fits the image of Sherlock in my mind.
Hmm.
And he has that certain otherness to him that
Hmm.
Sherlock has. It's kind of like removed from everything around him because his mind is so different than everybody else. And the fact that they did 28 episodes a season for 7 seasons. So Miller is
Wow.
now currently played Sherlock Holmes more than anybody else.
Wow. That's really impressive.
Right. And I thought that the pairing with Lucy Liu was genius. It worked
Hmm.
really well. Um, they got away from the Watson that just follows him around going,
Hmm.
isn't Sherlock great? To a Watson who's a full participant in
Hmm.
the story. So I thought that worked really, really well. Um, people will point to Benedict Cumberbatch. I actually thought the first two seasons of Sherlock were brilliant,
Hmm.
absolutely brilliant, and then it
Hmm.
lost its way.
Yeah.
And for whatever driven reasons, it just went by the wayside and lost its focus. But those first two seasons are brilliant.
Hmm. I've always been a big fan of Jeremy Brett, but I think that's
Yes,
because as a kid, that was my version of Sherlock Holmes that
and
I
that's
first met.
yeah, and I think that's funny because who's your favorite James Bond? It's the James Bond that you grew
Yes.
up with, right? I can't stand the Roger Moore James Bond. Yet there are people who that's their
Hmm.
James Bond
The
because that's
Spy Who
what
Loved Me was their first movie, or
movie,
Moonraker, and I'm like,
right?
what?
Yeah, so it's the same thing with Sherlock Holmes, and Jeremy Brett was a living embodiment of Holmes, the classic Holmes,
Hmm.
and the way they did that. And unfortunately, again, they were trying to do all the shows, but Brett was
Hmm.
sick and
Hmm.
not doing well, and so the later shows suffered. But really, that is you have to point to the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes as the classic.
Hmm. There, it was really fun because I watched My Fair Lady once, and I remember being like, "Wait, why is Sherlock Holmes in this?" Because Jeremy Brett has such the tiniest role in this movie. To your point about Ian Fleming, though, and James Bond, I think that's what has been interesting watching, reading through this. Is I'm a big Bond fan. Shocker, I know so many things. Who could tell? But the Sherlock Holmes legacy has endured through all these people that have written new stories. Some of them authorized, some of them not. James Bond has had a similar thing in that the films
Yeah,
have taken his character, and the same thing with the continuation novels. I've never been thrown off by a James Bond continuation novel because I grew up with Sherlock Holmes first. And with Sherlock Holmes, you have the canon, and then you have the extra. And so I
right.
could always delineate between those two. Whereas a lot of other Bond fans that I've met are like, oh, well, this is all garbage if it's not Ian Fleming, or, well, it's all canon. And I'm like, that's not the way it works.
Not the way it works. No, I call it Sherlock adjacent,
Hmm.
right? Um, and that expands to other shows like the television show House. It was
Hmm.
basically
Yes.
Sherlock Holmes as a doctor.
Hmm.
The names have been changed to protect the innocent or whatever, right? But it was Sherlock Holmes in a medical setting. So there are many things that I call Sherlock adjacent that are like that, where the
Hmm.
characters come through. Um, for me, I have been so involved in the Westerns doing the Six Gun Justice podcast. I mean, that was all I read for
Hmm.
about 5 years to do this podcast and all I talked about. And so when that we decided it was just far too much work and there were other
Hmm.
projects to do, I was kind of casting around for, something to read and
Hmm.
enjoy. And
Yeah.
that's how I got back to Sherlock Holmes. But it was interesting in that the Basil Rathbone films,
Hmm.
the first couple were just played straight in Victorian England. And I think those, I could be wrong here, but I think those were with 20th Century Fox and they didn't do very well. Then changes studios and they update the stories to 1942.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, the 12 movies that we love with Basil Rathbone are all set in 1942. They're not set in Victorian London. So I picked up a book that was a Sherlockian pastiche set in 1942.
Oh.
And it was such a great job that
Hmm.
that's what drew me back into Sherlock. And now I
Hmm.
want to know what else is out there in this pastiche field.
Okay, I
And
have
I,
to ask,
yeah.
what was there anything that when you were getting the essays back from people with
Mhm.
like, this is the book, this is the thing, were there any that you had never heard of and completely threw you like, wow, how did I not know about this?
Well, the shocker was when I picked up the big book of Sherlock Holmes stories edited by Otto Penzler. And in his introduction, he says there's 25,000 pastiches of Sherlock Holmes. I went, what? How can that possibly be? And then the more I got into it, the more every time I turned around, there was another Sherlock
Hmm.
Holmes incarnation, and they just kept coming and coming. So really, it's the vast universe, how
Hmm.
vast it is of Sherlock Holmes that really shocked me,
Hmm.
um, and how much I enjoyed some of them.
There's a collection that a friend gave me for my birthday one year called the Montana Chronicles.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is it kind of hits because it's Victorian England set, period, but it's Holmes and Watson in Montana for reasons. And so it has like this Western frontier flavor to it, but the author did an amazing job of keeping within the voice and the tone of Doyle and Watson to such an extent that I'm like, this is so fascinatingly different.
And I think it's worthy of the kudos it has received. But remember when I told you if you don't like it, don't read it, don't watch it? Sherlock Holmes in America is my
Hmm.
bugaboo. That's what's never appealed
Really?
to me. It has to be in England or Europe, that flavor to
Hmm.
it. Now, that's not to
Hmm.
say that Sherlock Holmes in Montana is not an excellent series, right? But again, it's a matter of taste. What do you like to
Yeah.
read? What do you like?
Hmm.
I'm not saying that he shouldn't go to Montana. I'm just
It's just
saying
what's your preference?
I'm going to read the other ones.
Yeah, because well, that's the thing. There is such an endless well
Yeah.
of Sherlock and Sherlock adjacent stories. In doing just a bit of prep research for the episode, I saw that you have been involved in the Fight Card series, and there were a couple of Sherlock pastiches in the Fight Card series.
Yeah. And that was a spur of the moment thing. I was at a convention and we were talking about Fight Card and one thing and another, and it just popped into my head, that Sherlock Holmes has this boxing background.
Hmm.
And so I called Andrew Salmon and I said, "Look, I know you're doing Sherlockian pastiches. What about Sherlock Holmes in boxing ring?" And the next thing you know, he was off and running. And those ended up being our best sellers out of the Fight Card series, out of the 56 books in that series. And I think they still do well. We put out a compendium called Queensberry Rules, which is a
Mm.
collection of all three fight card novels and a bunch of other stuff and short stories on the same theme. That's done very well for him. So again, it's adaptable to
Hmm.
everything. Now, saying Sherlock Holmes in London is my thing, we have to take into account that I just said that Johnny Lee Miller, who's Sherlock Holmes
Yes.
actually in New York, is my favorite portrayal. So, um, but New York is
Hmm.
very Victorian.
Yes. It's also super cosmopolitan.
Yeah, and it really has that same feel rather than the open plains.
Hmm.
Now, I will say Steve Hawkinsmith, he writes a Holmes on the Range series, right? But the conceit there is not that Holmes is out west. It's
Hmm.
about two Western cowpunching brothers who become obsessed with Sherlock Holmes and want to investigate things the way that Sherlock Holmes does. Now, that to me really worked well. And
Hmm.
I think Steve did a tremendous job with those.
Hmm. Do you have a couple of things that when you read it, it makes it more so Holmes, not in America is a big one,
Right.
but are there any other specific traits that you feel like it's more Doyle-like when you read it?
Um, More Doyle-like. I
Hmm.
think it has to
More
have the
traditional.
right. I think it has to have the narrative voice of Watson. I think there's been a couple that I've tried to read that are told from Sherlock's perspective.
Hmm.
But I think the thing with Sherlock is we really can't see things through his eyes because he's
Yeah.
not going to take the time to explain it to us. You have to have that Watson character that's the everyman, and
Hmm.
that's how we come to understand Holmes. So that to me is the most important of the Doyle traits to this. Um, and I think that there's a fine line between pastiche and parody.
Hmm.
Now, there's lots of parodies out there. There's a couple of them that I'm okay with, but for the most part, parody doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Again, there's room for everything here, but that's not where my interests lie. So for me, playing it straight and those um, deductions that Sherlock makes can't just be giant leaps of faith. Oh,
Yeah.
that button came from a store that was closed 13 years ago, and he has specialized knowledge, but let's bring it in to the point where it is still believable that somebody could have that much knowledge. So
Hmm.
those are the things that work for me.
Hmm. Just this is a slight tangent. I'm a big fan of the Timothy Zahn Star Wars books. The
Mm.
first three, Heir of the Empire and the Heir of the Empire series. Grand Admiral Thrawn is a Sherlock Holmes pastiche or variant in a lot of
Hmm.
ways. And that was when I first picked up those books was like, oh my goodness, he even has his little Watson-like character that's reacting off of him.
Well,
There's
let me
just
tie into that. So it's hitting both of my sweet spots, right?
yes. Again, the character is just so eternal. Besides that, he's been able to be reiterated in a Doctor Who fashion by so many people over the
Right.
generations. What do you think has made Sherlock Holmes stand out in the consciousness?
I think one of the things is we like to see justice done. We like our
Hmm.
mysteries solved. And
Hmm.
Sherlock does this. He gives us closure in a world that has very little closure. Now, Sherlock Holmes is also known for doing his own justice. He often makes a decision about whether somebody gets picked up by the police or he lets them go. And I think there's a certain everyman in that we would like to see, somebody who has that ability to make those decisions. But going back to your Star Wars question,
Yeah.
that's what made some of the choices in 52 Weeks, 52 Sherlock Holmes novels interesting. Because
Hmm.
as editor, I was able to stand up and say, no, I'm going to include this, even though it doesn't match what I originally started out with. And one of
Hmm.
those things was Charles Gramlich, who I've worked with a long time on other books. When I asked him to write an essay, he said, can I write about the Star Wars Next Generation episode where they all become Sherlock Holmes characters? And I went, if that's important to you and you can tell me why it's important to you, then
Hmm.
let's do this. So, there's a television script that's basically included in
Oh, that's
as one of the
cool.
pastiches. So there were several things like that where I
Hmm.
made editorial decisions that this is my book. I don't
Hmm.
care. I'm going to put it in there.
Uh-huh. Well, again, it's a love letter to all
Yes.
of these, it literally love letters. It's 52 love letters to something that has stood out about the Sherlock Holmes world to someone. And much like in the same way when we write stories, it's the characters that we really
Yes.
get drawn to because each one of these essays has a personal component to it. It's meaningful and we glob onto it and we resonate with it because we understand
Yes.
what it's like to love something.
And you can pick up and dip in here and dip in there.
Hmm.
It's that kind of book. But one of the other things I realized early on is I didn't want to just have a run through of 52 novel. I wanted to find a way to break it up.
Hmm.
So I broke it down into 5 sections of the pastiches. And then in between, I did what I call intermission pieces.
Hmm.
And so there are people like Ron Fortier who has published over 20 Sherlock Holmes pastiches. And I wanted to know, okay, what's it like to have the onus of publishing Sherlock Holmes? And it must have been a personal decision. You must love Holmes in order to do this. And
Hmm.
then Rob Davis, who works with Ron doing all the illustrations. Okay, we know Sidney Paget, but for you, what was it like illustrating Sherlock Holmes? And there were several others like that, um, uh, really kind of meant something to me because they were areas of Sherlock Holmes that had never been addressed before. Collecting Sherlock Holmes, manufacturing Sherlock Holmes, a gentleman, Dana Mancini, who makes all these Sherlock Holmes items. But the one that really, really struck me was Amy Thomas's piece about, um, you know, the detective, my disease and me. And she writes about how her personal physical problems
Hmm.
tied in with her love of Sherlock Holmes and how Sherlock Holmes has helped her get through these life-threatening situations. And I went, this is the most personal thing that we have in the book, but it was exactly what I was looking for. And she did a masterful job of this. So I thought to myself, this has to be read by a wider audience. And so
Hmm.
that's why I look to include those other things as well.
Hmm. Again, it's a good compendium of if you love Sherlock Holmes, if you even just like Sherlock Holmes, this
Yeah.
is an excellent resource material. I was realizing that as I was flipping through the pages that I've seen a handful of these on the shelves of bookstores, but you're right, there are so many of them that I'm always like, I don't recognize the author. I don't know if I'm going to get something good or something that's absolute hot garbage.
Right.
This book is an excellent resource to actually know if you are someone that likes Sherlock Holmes stories, to
Right.
know what each one kind of is and narrow down at least 52 great options.
Yeah, I mean you're gonna find something in there to love. You're also gonna find stuff in there that you're not gonna love. And that's okay. That's the whole point of this because what you don't love, somebody else will. And to open up Sherlock's world to people and allow them to have this kind of guide to what
Hmm.
they are looking for so that they can choose with some knowledge, I think that's a valuable service.
Hmm. Was there a book that when you got it and then the essay, you were like, ah, I'm still not touching that one with a 10-foot pole?
No, that didn't happen. I said I had to send a couple back because I didn't feel that they were personal enough, and
Hmm.
one of them I had to send back again. But I finally coaxed it out of
Hmm.
the essayist, right? I finally got
Hmm.
what I wanted.
I
Um,
meant actually the book, like one of those books you read the essay and were like, I'm not going to read that Sherlock Holmes book.
oh, I see what you mean. Um, there have been a couple, um, but for the most part, I don't talk bad about
That's a good move.
other writers and their books. I mean, I might say I don't like Sherlock Holmes in the West, but that's generic, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that the book's bad. So I'm not much on naming specific books that I really hated,
Hmm.
but there
That's
were a
fair.
couple, you know.
Well, I think that again, it's the delight of the variations that you get because Sherlock Holmes is such a concept at this point. You
Yeah,
need like the same five recipe things. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about the once characters enter public domain. Like really, what does it take so that at what point does it become something new versus it's still a pastiche of something older? And Sherlock
right.
Holmes is the perfect example of this because he has had so many reincarnations over the last over 100 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Uh, but I also think, that Sherlock Holmes fandom, the real hardcore Sherlock Holmes fandom, they're not exclusive, but it's hard to get into that type of experience, especially if you're new to it. And so this book, I think, helps to fill that void and helps to
Hmm.
bring you into the world of Sherlock Holmes that goes beyond what you may have seen in a Basil Rathbone movie or a Sherlock episode or an Elementary episode. That there is a way to find out much more about Sherlock and
Hmm.
continue with your love of Sherlock,
It's very
rather than
accessible.
doing cosplay or whatever it may be. That's great, and there's room for all of that.
Hmm.
But I think for somebody who's not into that world, it is hard to break into it.
Hmm. Because again, there are a lot of options. The core canon is always the core canon, but we're not
Yeah,
going to get more Doyle. So then it becomes a question of what's next.
yeah. I mean, one of the things that was interesting to me, we talked about the canon being four novels and 56 short stories, right?
Hmm.
Actually, there's 58 short stories, but most people don't know about the other two. One of them was a very small, short Sherlock Holmes adventure that was written to be put on a book for a dollhouse. All right. And there's another small oddball story that uh, they are canon because they were written by Arthur Conan Doyle, but they're really not accessible to the great majority of the public. But that for me was a fascinating fact to come across that you will never know until
Hmm.
you dig deeper into this. And does it really matter? No, but it was really interesting.
The I came across in reading the From Holmes to Sherlock book,
Mhm.
just there was a collection that was written by I haven't read the entirety of 52 Weeks yet because it's a good what here's a great thing about this book I just want to point out. If I have not devoured it and I'm actually savoring the bites because it is a book you can just pick up at
Yes.
any point, that's a really great sign. The there's a collection that was written by one of Doyle's kids that he
Yes.
assembled his own, and you have this next generation that's trying to maintain the legacy. And I remembered as I was reading it that a buddy of mine actually had a copy that I read way, way back in the day.
Yeah, and that was Adrian Conan Doyle, and he
Hmm.
was working with another established mystery writer. And again, because it was Adrian Conan Doyle, it was authorized by the estate.
Hmm.
There's a long-running legacy of copyright issues, but they're all a moot point now because all of the Sherlock Holmes stories are now in the public domain, and any arguments that the estate may have gone by the wayside.
That was
Um,
the other thing in Holmes and Sherlock, is it really highlighted this is how copyright law works
yeah,
in a way that I
yeah.
never realized with the other ones. Because I didn't realize the
It
Holmes
was
estate was still getting money for as the early as late as the Robert Downey Jr. movies.
Yeah. I mean, they actually tried to stop the Enola Holmes films because they're saying it was copyright infringement, but eventually that got thrown out of court as well. And in fact, the Doyle estate really ran into some problems in the courts. The courts are going, oh no, not again. We've already settled this. But they still tried, and sometimes I get it. I remember when I first started writing, I wrote a police novel, and I don't know, about 2 years later, I got a letter from the Kleenex company saying that Kleenex is a registered trademark and must be capitalized in any work that you do, right? It's not generic for tissue. They have to do that in order to maintain their copyright. I mean, they weren't asking
Hmm.
me to do anything, but they were putting me on notice that when you
Hmm.
use the term Kleenex, it's not interchangeable with tissues. Kleenex is a brand name copyrighted. And I think that, taking care of a copyright can be very difficult,
Hmm.
especially with something as popular as Sherlock Holmes.
Because at what point is it still Holmes?
Yeah.
The the Fleming books do a very good job of highlighting brand names and makes it very of its time. One of the things I appreciate about the Holmes works in general is that they have this timelessness where Victorian England feels like it could be at any point, up to even his last bow, if I remember right. He has technically a spy mission, is
Yeah.
one of the stories, which just feels completely oddball and out of place. But because it's still Victorian England, it just has this sense of it could be the 1940s. You just
Yeah.
change a few tiny details.
It, again, Sherlock Holmes Victorian England is a character in and of itself. It is not um, it is not essentially realistic,
Hmm.
but it is there, and we, the fog and the hansom cabs, and we immediately get this picture in our head uh,
Hmm.
of that period and that era. And I think that was, again, a brilliance on the part of Arthur Conan Doyle to create that kind of background for these characters.
Hmm. Is there anything that you've taken from the Sherlock Holmes stories, intentionally or unintentionally, in terms of like writing style or method, that you've kind of gone, oh, that's really good. How can I replicate that in what I write?
Actually, it was a matter of not replicating it. I wrote a book called Lie Catchers about a team of interrogators, and based on some of my experiences in the field. Um, and the lead character is a Sherlock Holmes oddball. And so I had to write the book from the point of view of his partner, a female
Hmm.
partner. And I was bound and determined that um, she was going to be his partner. Yes, he
Hmm.
has these things. Yes, she's learning. We're learning about him through her, but she is not Watson.
Hmm.
She is, an equal partner with him. And in fact, to the point where the big last interrogation in the book, I give to her because that felt right. That's the way they work together. They trade off interrogations to a certain extent, and she's up. So it isn't Sherlock stepping in and saying, I'm going to solve this. No, she's got to step up, and she does it in such a way that um, the other character, Ray Pagan, could not have done. She
Hmm.
has her own style and her own way of doing things. But that was really a conscious decision not to make it a Sherlock Holmes pastiche per se.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Sherlock Holmes has become, in so many ways, the gold standard of a lot of things when it comes to investigations, when it comes to mysteries. He's iconic in the literal sense. So
Yes,
when you are coming up with stuff that fits in any way, shape, or form with those genres, coming up with ways to subvert audience expectations of what that
yes,
means helps make work stand out.
yes, absolutely.
When you did the 52 weeks of Westerns, you've done a couple of different 52 weeks books. If I remember correctly, you said the Western TV shows, Western novels, and now
And
we've got
movies.
Sherlock Holmes and movies.
Yeah, and now Sherlock Holmes.
What is the next 52 weeks
Uh,
frontier?
I'm not sure yet because it has to be something that I'm passionate about. I
Hmm.
mean, it took a year to put together 52 weeks, 52 Sherlock Holmes novels. And for me to live with a genre for that long, I've really got to be vested in it.
Do you
So
wake up with like dreams of Sherlock Holmes pastiches running through your mind at this
there are
point?
days, yeah. Um, uh, the one thing that I keep coming back to if I was to do another one is possibly uh, what we call the Age of Sail genre. So
Ooh,
Hornblower,
yes.
um, and so many different sailing adventure
Hmm.
series. It is something that would lend itself to this type of treatment, right? That there has to be enough
Hmm.
variation and enough love for a genre uh, to be able to do this. It's not really a financial decision what's going to be a bestseller.
Yeah.
It really is what can I bring to another 52 weeks book that I would love, that I would want to
Hmm.
spend time with, and that others would be willing to write about. Quite
Hmm.
honestly, you know.
Hmm.
So maybe, big maybe.
We're not putting you on the spot. You're not committing. You're not sealing it in blood. The interesting thing I see in some of these is Sherlock Holmes to Western doesn't feel like there is a wide jump, but I've
Mm,
always believed that there are elements of the Western and elements of a mystery that have more crossover than not. And I
yes,
think that you kind of are doing a similar thing if we're talking sailing, because it's era in a lot of senses, it's period in a lot of senses. It's also
yes.
that sense of uncovering something. It's exploration and discovery. And that's what a mystery kind of is. And that's also what Frontier in the West kind of is.
Yeah, and again, there's enough there that you can talk about old favorites, and
Hmm.
you can also find non-traditional or smaller book series or books that are not really well known even to lovers of the genre. And
Hmm.
that's kind of, where, the interesting thing, the difference between Sherlock Holmes and doing an Age of Sail is the Sherlock Holmes pastiches are still prevalent.
Yes.
You
I can
can
still find
hardly
them on the
keep up with all
shelves.
the new ones that come out. It's
Yeah.
really difficult. Right now, Age of Sail, it's not on television, it's not in the movies. There's not a whole lot of new books coming out about it, but it still does fit within that wider parameter.
Okay, actually, that does make me think of a question that I should have written down here to ask you. Is there a specific pastiche that you're hoping that when people read through the book, okay, this is something that not enough people have read?
Ah, I'm I want to talk. It really goes back to A Study in Crimson, which was the Robert Harris book that reintroduced me to Sherlock Holmes. This is the
Oh.
one that was set in 1942,
Hmm.
and there's a sequel to it, and hopefully a third on the way, according to him. Um, but to me, it was so well done and so clearly evocative of everything that I had loved about Sherlock Holmes as a young man, and brought me back to the world of Sherlock Holmes that I think it would do that for others as well. And quite frankly, it is not as well known as it should be.
Hmm.
It's only a few years old, and it was just excellent. So for me, that would be what I would point to.
Is this the I might be getting my author's names mixed up. Is this the same Harris that wrote
Fatherland? No, it's a
Oh, okay.
different, yeah, it's a different guy. which I think is possibly part of the issue.
One of the guests we've had on the show is Eric P. Bishop. And I asked him, why Eric P? And he's like, because there's just an Eric Bishop. I'm like, oh, well, I can see how that happens.
Yeah. So
Um,
at least the P wasn't for Paul, hopefully.
it was for Paul, actually. Now you say that. Okay. Just side note, you need to talk to Eric P. Bishop on A Tale of Two Scribes, his podcast, so Eric P. Bishop can interview Paul Bishop.
That would be very meta.
Well, we're talking Sherlock Holmes, and at a certain point, it does become meta in some senses
Yes.
because there are some of them that do have that self-referential version. I
Yeah.
was pleased to see there's a handful of these I currently have in my Audible catalog. However, I will admit it also pushed me back to re-listening to the casebook of Sherlock Holmes, and I feel like those are the ones that I haven't read the most, so I'm enjoying the re-listen, the rewatch.
Yeah, and quite frankly, this love for Victorian England and Sherlock Holmes has driven me to a number of other Victorian set mystery series that
Hmm.
that have no connection to Sherlock Holmes other than time period.
Hmm.
And I have found that I've had a great enjoyment of some of those. So um it, one thing can always lead to another. I mean,
I
that's the beauty of reading. There's always something.
mhm.
Although I don't know about you, but sometimes I stand in front of the bookcase like this and go, I have nothing to read.
Yes. I have an endless TBR pile, in part because of this podcast. People recommend stuff, and I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, I'd love to read that, but I've got like five guests with books that are coming out within a month. I need to get these read.
right. Or,
Uh,
just there's nothing that hits my fancy right at this instant. Yes, I do want to read that, but not right now. What else have I got?
I'm in such a specific niche mood. I do also want to, because you're an expert in this, I think that if you've edited 52 weeks of Sherlock Holmes, we can call you a subject matter expert.
Thanks.
There is a Holmes, I'll call it vaguely Holmes adjacent because there was a series his brother-in-law wrote that was like a mystery, but a thief. Am I getting the right?
Oh, yes, it's the Raffles
The Raffles. I was like,
series.
Raggles?
Yeah, Hornung is the author of that, and he was the brother-in-law, and um, in some ways he's the anti-Sherlock Holmes, but the real anti-Sherlock Holmes is Arsène Lupin. The
Oh.
in fact, the two authors did not really get along. And the author of the Lupin series put out a Sherlock Holmes Lupin versus Sherlock Holmes, in which Lupin the thief runs circles around Sherlock Holmes, and there was this lawsuit and one thing and another, and so he had to change the name from Sherlock to Sheerlock or something like that. I'm not quite sure where it went, but it has recently been reissued as Lupin versus Holmes. So over time, things change.
There is a VeggieTales Sherlock Holmes. I'm going to guess that did not show up in any of the people's submissions for 52 weeks, but I
No.
will say special affection. If you like Larry the Cucumber, folks, check out Sherlock Holmes.
Veggie Tales Sherlock Holmes. If I'd have known about it, if you'd have called me up and say, "Hey, I want to do this for the book," we would have done it.
Uh,
Absolutely.
we'll make it the unofficial 53rd week
There you
for
go.
leap year.
I mean, honestly, that was one of the things when we did the 52 weeks, 52 Western TV shows. It was really hard to narrow it down to 52 Westerns because there were so many of them that
Hmm.
I actually wrote another companion piece that was all the other shows that I thought should have been included that didn't quite make the cut. And in many ways, that's what we're faced with here.
Hmm.
But this isn't a best of list
Yeah.
or or an all-inclusive list, anything like that. This is a very, very subjective
Hmm.
compendium of essays that people are writing about what they love. You may
Hmm.
not, but they do. And I think that the essays are entertaining enough on their own to be readable, whether or not you would like the book they're writing about.
100% true. As I was flipping through the pages, there are like two or three that I read and I was like, not really my thing for various reasons. But it was so enjoyable because of the format where it describes what it is, describes background on the author, which I, as someone that loves like the history of it all, enjoyed. But then it also told how this essayist came across this book. And it is that personal connection
Yeah.
that really anchors it.
Yeah. So as again, the essays are worth reading on their own value, not just because of the book that they're writing about. The people that are involved in this, they're mostly friends of mine. There are three people that I didn't know that I reached out to who are now friends of mine. But in general, I've been down this path before with them, and they knew exactly what I was looking for, and so it worked out really well. I mean, I think I had a couple of people that I reached out to that I didn't know who didn't know me, who were too busy to do an essay or didn't respond at all. So there's some big names in the Sherlockian world that are not in here because they chose not to respond or didn't know who I was or whatever it was. But everybody that I knew that I reached out to was immediately on board with this. So that was very gratifying.
It's a fantastic production. Again, hats off to you. The
Thank you.
Deerstalker tipped. It is a fantastic collection. People should definitely check it out. One of the questions I always like to ask is what is your writing routine if you have one? And if so, what does it look like? In this case, I actually kind of want to ask more specifically, editing this collection, kind of what did that process look like for you?
Um, the one of the things that I've done over the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years is I've been an editor with Wolfpack Publishing, and so I've edited, probably 100 books for Wolfpack, and before that, I cut my editing teeth on the Fight Card series.
Hmm.
50 books on the Fight Card series, editing that, and very quickly you begin to see the same mistakes made over and over again, right? Or the same
Hmm.
issues over and over again. So for me as an editor now, I'm really able to drop right in and go, okay, this is where we need to tighten up, this is where we need to get rid of this, and change those things around and then go back to the author and talk it over with them to make sure that I'm not missing their point,
Hmm.
right? And that they did it this way for a specific reason. But in general, that's my job, is to tighten things up and make it smooth and readable, and that the essays are not too jarringly different, that they do fit within the format that I had laid out.
Hmm.
Um, the so for editing, it really is a different muscle than a
Hmm.
writing muscle. Um, One of the things I like to do with my authors is I'll tell them, okay, you've got a book contract. You are going to run into a writer's block on this at some point, right? We all do, right? We all reach a point where we hate the novel that we're writing, have no idea how we're going to finish it, and we sit there and fret. And I tell them, don't do that. Call me when you hit that snag. And I'm in a position where I can see, you can't see the forest for the trees. I can see the forest, and I've got enough background and story that within
Hmm.
10 minutes I'll have you back on track. And my favorite thing is when they can't wait to get off the phone. Oh, okay, got it, got it. Yep, okay, yep, fine. See you later.
It's like in the hero's journey, you meet the mentor and they're like, oh, no, no, wait, wait, just
Yeah. And
step here.
so my job now is done, right? Because they're fired back up. They've got over that hump of the block and see their story from a different perspective now, and that can drive them to the finish. So that really is, my mandate as an editor. It, in some ways, it's messed with my own fiction writing. I write a lot of nonfiction. Nonfiction's great. I over edit myself. I really do. I edit myself, almost obsessively compulsively into a corner, and it really is hard to break from, um, put back on a writer's hat instead of an editor's hat.
Well, it's two different modes of thinking.
Yeah, very
Uh,
much so.
my day job is I work in organic certification, and so my job is to edit and do analysis of people's documentation, look for flaws, be very analytical, which means trying to switch from that to then writing takes a really hard, like you hear the gears grinding when you try
Yes.
moving the stick shift type of mentality. So I appreciate what you're saying.
Okay.
Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
You can find 52 Weeks, 52 Sherlock Holmes novels, obviously on Amazon.
Hmm.
It can be ordered at any bookstore near you. Genius Books, the publisher, has been wonderful in the quality that they're putting out. In fact, we've got a limited edition hardcover of the book coming out with bonus
Sweet.
material.
This is a
Probably
book
be
that
lit.
is beautiful to have in hardcover just because it's so,
Yeah.
again, it's so
And there'll
rich.
be bonus material in there as well to make it worthwhile. Another cover that was done specifically for the hardcover. So there's lots of ways to do this. You can go to the Genius Books website and find it there. If you're interested, hook up with me on Facebook or other social media, and you can follow what's going on.
Awesome. I will link all of that in the show notes. Thanks for coming on the show, Paul.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much for having me. It's really been a fun time.
Oh, good.
Thanks.